Wow. The podcast about the superpowers of highly sensitive people.
Today I would like to talk to you, with you, about high sensitivity. What a surprise. Being more precise about theoretical foundation of so-called high sensitivity. Yeah. So, terms related to sensitivity become a popular concept also in so-called pop culture under the name of high sensitivity. So we have now many different publications on sensitivity of children and adults, including some kind of guides for highly sensitive people, workbooks and compilation supporting parents, highly sensitive children, and so on. So the theoretical background of those compilation is not always clear. And it's often based on intuitive knowledge or personal experience of authors. That's why I want to ask you, as a leading person, as a leading researcher in this area, to explain us the theories, the theoretical background of this area.
Yeah, so actually there is quite a bit of theory on individual differences and sensitivity, and these different theories have different backgrounds and different authors. The idea that people would differ in their sensitivity, the degree to which they perceive the environment and respond to it, is not a new idea. This idea has already been discussed and proposed by C.G. Jung, a Swiss psychiatrist, about 100 years ago, or more than 100 years ago. And you can see throughout over these last 100 years that this idea has come up here and there in different concepts, not as precise as we have it today, but the general idea that some people are more sensitive to what they experience, goes back quite a long time. And in the 90s is where three different independent psychologists developed more specific theories on such differences. There are other theories before that are very relevant for our understanding of sensitivity, but it's really those three theories in the 90s that shape pretty much the understanding that we have today. So the first one that emerged with those thoughts is Jay Belsky's differential susceptibility hypothesis, which he started writing on the early 90s. And that was the idea that, based on the evolutionary theory, that it would make sense for children to differ in their susceptibility to the rearing environment. Susceptibility, in other words, for sensitivity. And he basically suggested that some children would be more open to be influenced by the parenting that they received than other children. And he provided an evolutionary rationale for that. So that was one of the first theories, with a particular focus on early childhood, with a particular focus on genetic differences or temperament, stable biological differences between children. And then in the mid-90s, Elaine Aron, who's a clinical psychologist, she came across the idea that people might be differing in their sensitivity. She coined the term high sensitive personality. She developed a measure for adults to measure sensitivity. And she really kicked off a new research focus or research area on a personality trait of sensitivity with a strong focus on adults. She was less concerned with evolutionary reasoning behind that, although she does include that. But she was mostly focusing on a personality trait or a temperament trait of sensitivity, how to measure it, and describing the experience of people that are highly sensitive and how this is associated with individual differences in brain function as well. The third theory is a developmental one that was based on evolutionary theory by Boyce and Ellis. based on some of their own research, looking at physiological reactivity in children, they found that more reactive children seem to be equally affected by negative experiences and positive experiences. And based on that, they developed a theory called biological sensitivity to context. And what is unique to their theory, that they said that the level of sensitivity, so they said that individuals differ in their sensitivity, but the level of sensitivity would be influenced by the quality of the early environment, so that in particularly adverse environments, but also particularly supportive environments, children would develop a high degree of sensitivity. So that was their view. The Elaine Arendt's theory was called sensory processing sensitivity. So I was doing research on differential susceptibility, and in 2015 I was invited to write a paper, which was a good opportunity to really sort of consolidate and integrate those different theories from my perspective, to try to bring this together. And I did that. So I integrated those three different theories, taking the key components of each theory, but bringing them together in the concept of environmental sensitivity, which is very simply defined as the ability to perceive and process information about the environment. And the idea is that some people are more sensitive and others less. The ones that are more sensitive are not just more sensitive to negative aspects of their experiences, but they also benefit more from positive experiences.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we also know, and also from your work, that there were some other different approaches, vantage sensitivity and the diathesis stress model. Are they compared to any of that you mentioned before?
Yeah, so there are different patterns in how those differences emerge. Mm-hmm. So diathesis stress, or another word for that is vulnerability stress, is a well-established pattern of how individual factors interact with environmental factors in the prediction of usually mental health problems. So it's a concept that has been used and applied very much in clinical psychology and psychiatry. The idea is that it is only people that have some level of vulnerability, usually within themselves, so that could be a genetic vulnerability, or it could be a personality trait, something stable, vulnerable, that increases their risk to develop mental health problems if they experience an external adversity as well. So, for example, someone that has a genetic predisposition for depression is at heightened risk to develop depression if they experience some, let's say, a significant loss in their lives. But having that disposition for depression in the absence of an adverse event may not make these individuals more depressed than other people that have less of such a disposition. So that's the diathesis stress, a very important concept. Mm-hmm. And it sort of reflects the lower end, or what we sometimes call the dark side of differential susceptibility. Yes. It doesn't really say anything about how these people respond to positive experiences. Mm-hmm. So we therefore developed, inspired by differential susceptibility, myself and Chybelsky, we developed the concept of vantage sensitivity, which describes the positive end of that spectrum. And at the positive end, we propose that certain people, due to specific characteristics, so for example, sensitivity, might benefit more from positive experiences than others. Whereas people that don't have high degrees of sensitivity, they may not benefit from positive experiences to the same degree. So the vantage sensitivity is a theory, is a model that describes individual differences in response to positive experiences. The diathesis stress or vulnerability stress model describes individual differences in response to negative experiences. And the environmental sensitivity perspective, which includes or is built on differential susceptibility, sensory processing sensitivity and biological sensitivity to context. This describes the combination of both the diathesis stress and vantage sensitivity models, in that more susceptible or more sensitive individuals are more likely to develop problems when they experience negative events, but they also are more likely to benefit from the positive effects of positive experiences.
Yes, so we often see only this dark side, like those, a lot of research showing the sensitivity before vulnerability as a risk factor of mental disorders. So yes, this is opening, like having new perspective of some benefits from being sensitive. So environmental sensitivity is something like an umbrella model, like an umbrella term. And what do those concepts in theories has in common?
So environmental sensitivity, yes, is a framework that integrates existing models and basically suggests that there are significant differences in how people respond to the environment, with some being more affected and some being less affected. And it also suggests that those differences have a genetic basis, but at the same time, they're also shaped by their early context. That means that individual differences in sensitivity have both a genetic component, but are also influenced by the quality of the early environment that people grow up in. So one important aspect of that is the concept of that there are different sensitivity types. And the idea here is that because sensitivity is also shaped by the early environment, it is the quality of the early environment that might shape different types of sensitivity. So let's say we have a group of people, they all have a similar genetic predisposition for sensitivity. The sensitivity will develop in slightly different ways depending on the quality of their environment. So if they grow up in very harsh environments where parents are, not very supportive and might be very strict, or these children are being bullied or experience lots of adverse experiences, if that's their predominant quality of their early environment, we would expect that these children are developing a sensitivity that is sort of emphasized at the lower end of the spectrum. So they're more sensitive to negative experiences, but not necessarily as much to positive experiences. On the other hand, someone that is genetically highly sensitive and grows up in a very supportive environment, they may develop a sensitivity specifically towards the more positive and supportive aspects of the environment. And people that experience sort of both negative and positive experiences, they will develop a sort of equal sensitivity to both positive and negative experiences. But the people that don't have a genetic predisposition for sensitivity, their sensitivity is basically not influenced by their early environment. So their sensitivity is unlikely to change. So that's a hypothesis that we are doing research on at the moment. And there is some research already that suggests that, yes, it's the interplay between a genetic predisposition and the quality of the early environment that may shape different types of sensitivity.
Yeah, that's very interesting. A few years ago, when we did a systematic review that's supposed to present the basic of the issue, after the initial search of databases, we found about 800 of articles about high sensitivity. That's a lot. And what are nowadays now the main lines of research in this area?
So in the early days, it was the focus, and that's true for any new area in psychology. It focuses on the things like how do we measure sensitivity, and is it really is sensitivity really something that we can, does it really exist? And many of the aspects of the different theories will be tested. Is it really associated with differences in brain function? Is it really associated with genetic factors and things like that? So there has been quite a bit of work on measurement and the heritability, genetics. So there hasn't been that much on genetics, but there has been some work. So I think at the moment, there's quite a few. The research field has, quite a significant history now, but it's still relatively early. So I'm not aware of all the research that's being done, but I think there's more people looking at experimental ways to look at sensitivity, looking at cognitive aspects. There are some brain imaging studies. There is genetic work. There is work in animals to look at individual differences in sensitivity. And there's quite a bit of work looking at the measurement of sensitivity, finding more objective measures. So at the early days, the focus, at least when looking at sensory processing sensitivity, the focus was on self-report, on questionnaires. But we do know that questionnaires are important, but they only reflect the perspective of an individual. So we need more objective measures, and we have those in children, where we observe the behavior of children, and based on those observations, we're able to assess their sensitivity. So we need more objective measures of sensitivity in adults as well, and ideally having sort of physiological measures which may exist or may not exist. So it would be interesting to be able to look at the brain of a person, and then based on the structure and function of their brain, to be able to say whether that individual is highly sensitive or not.
So the biological basis of sensory processing sensitivity, environmental sensitivity, is a strong line. You said also that the measurement is also a strong line, like looking for more objective measures of sensitivity. Is there any main line of research that showed that sensitivity might be explained by other temperamental or personality traits?
Yes, there is quite a bit of work actually on that, and that's as well a focus. It has been an important focus to see how sensitivity relates to other established stable traits. So particularly personality and temperament. There has been a lot of research on how sensitivity is reflected in the big 5 personality traits. So these are the 5 traits which we can find and measure in humans all across the world. We do find the same 5 traits. They explain most of the personality of individuals. They're not perfect, but they're the established way to measure personality. And we have quite a good sense of what kind of personality profile fits with a highly sensitive person. So it seems, based on many different studies now, that highly sensitive people, they have a unique personality profile, which is defined by higher neuroticism. This is the propensity to experience anxiety. So people that score high on neuroticism, they're experiencing more negative emotions, negative affect. They're more anxious. They're more easily stressed. So people that are highly sensitive, they score higher on that personality dimension, but at the same time, they also score higher on the dimension of openness to experiences, which includes appreciation of beauty, creativity, thinking deeply about things, and so forth. And it's usually associated with more positive aspects of well-being. So highly sensitive people seem to have high scores on neuroticism and openness, which reflects that sensitivity to both negative and positive experiences.
Yes, that's true. And you also mentioned that there is a probability of mental problems, mental disorder, and when a person grow up and rise in an unfavorable, not good for them environment, like harsh one and so on. So are there any other mental disorders or problems that correlates with sensitivity when the environment is not good for a person?
Yeah, so this is actually an important field of research as well, and we're doing some work on that. So there have been quite a few studies in healthy populations. So these are just, for example, undergraduate students or online studies where we didn't look at people suffering from mental health problems per se. But we asked a bunch of people to complete questionnaires on sensitivity and also mental health symptoms. And what we usually find is that people that report higher sensitivity, they also report more symptoms of mental health problems, particularly anxiety and depression. So the more common affective disorders seem to be associated with heightened sensitivity. What we lack today is sort of studies that look at clinical populations, so people that have been diagnosed with mental health problems, and how to differentiate sensitivity from that. What is what's exactly the nature of that association? Is it that people that are experiencing mental health problems, that when they complete a sensitivity questionnaire, they tend to be higher on that as well, because there's some questions that are similar. So that's one of the issues that we're looking at the moment. But generally, it seems that people that are highly sensitive appear to be at a heightened risk to develop mental health problems, particularly when they experience some form of stress, adversity, loss, and so forth. At the same time, we do also see that people that are more sensitive seem to benefit more from psychological support.
Do you have any evidence for that, or could you explain it? How does it work that sensitivity might also be a protective factor?
Yes, so we've conducted several studies. This is focusing on focusing on children, both in the UK and a larger study in Italy. And in the UK, I was involved in the evaluation of a resilience-promoting intervention. Basically, this is an intervention to prevent the development of depressive symptoms. And we measured sensitivity in the children that participated and compared highly sensitive with low sensitive children. And what we found is that for the low sensitive children, there were no benefits of the intervention. Their depression symptoms didn't seem to decrease after the experience of the intervention. But in highly sensitive children, which experienced the intervention, depression symptoms actually decreased, and they stayed low even a year after that. So what we found is that when you provide a mental health intervention to children, it seems to be the highly sensitive ones that benefit from that. The ones that are heightened risk to develop depression, they also seem to benefit more from preventative interventions. And one of the reasons we think that might be the case is that highly sensitive ones, they might be more focused, they might process things more deeply. So they might be more likely to apply what they've learned during intervention, and that then helps them to be better, to have better health.
To benefit more. So sensitivity is often associated with emotionality, or people try to explain it like it is the same. So the importance of sensitivity for emotional functioning is important. We know that. I know that you also have some work about it. But we know that the essence of sensitivity, environmental sensitivity, is perception and processing. What does it actually mean?
Yes, so the theory suggests, and that's mostly based on Elaine Aron's sensory processing sensitivity. She suggested one of the core characteristics of highly sensitive people is that they have a higher emotional reactivity. That means they respond stronger emotionally to whatever they experience. So if they experience a disappointment, they might have stronger, feel more sad than someone else. They might experience that emotion stronger. But also when they experience something positive, they have stronger emotional reactions to that. So that's just one aspect of emotions, is how strong we react emotionally. And we know there's a lot of research suggesting that people differ in their emotional reactivity. Some people are generally less emotionally reactive. So whatever happens to them, they don't seem to respond strongly with their emotions. And some people are more reactive. And one of the reasons that some people are more reactive is because of their sensitivity. They experience things more deeply, and therefore also develop stronger emotional reactions to their experiences. There are other aspects that are important for the processing of emotions. So the first one is the recognition of emotions.
Yes.
So recognizing other people's emotions, but also your own emotions. And there is some research suggesting that highly sensitive people, they are better at recognizing emotions in other people's faces. So yeah, there are various different aspects of emotional reactivity, but it's I would say one of the key aspects of highly sensitive people is that they have stronger emotional reactions, and that might be the key factor that defines the experience of sensitive people for themselves, is that they will experience more likely negative emotions that are unpleasant, but they also more likely experience positive emotions that are pleasant.
And what is the percentage of highly sensitive people in population? And is it different when we are children or adult, or it up to measure that we use?
Yes, it's always influenced by the measure that we use. So that's important to realize, that whatever we measure, the way that how we measure it will have an impact on what we'll find. And that's true for anything that we measure, whether that's intelligence or whether that's sensitivity. So sensitivity has usually been assessed with self-report questionnaires. And we've done several analyses on that to see whether we could find a highly sensitive subgroup. And we generally seem to find that between 20 and 30% of adults fall into a group of high sensitivity. In children, in adolescents, that might be a little bit higher. And we don't know whether that is because of developmental processes, whether that's normal that people seem to be more sensitive as children and then get less sensitive as adults. It could be that as people get older, their coping strategies develop as well. And so maybe the sensitivity does manifest in a slightly different way. Yeah,
self-regulation skills are often helps with that.
Exactly.
Yeah, and you also, you and your team, you popularized the reliable knowledge about sensitivity, and you also have this great website, Sensitive Research. Tell us something about it. What is the purpose? Like showing the different perspective lines of research?
The reason is there's a lot of information on sensitivity.
That's true.
It's a very popular concept. Many people relate to it. Many people identify with it. Actually, a lot of people identify very strongly with being a highly sensitive person. So there is lots of books that have been written. There's lots of websites. But the research is still in the early stages. So much of what has been written is based on personal experiences, maybe interpreting research that has been conducted on different concepts but might still be relevant. So lots of indirect evidence or simply no evidence. So I had a research project on sensitivity, looking at the genetics of sensitivity to relationships. And I was offered by the funder who funded that research. They wanted to encourage dissemination, basically, that we really make sure that our research findings are made accessible to other people outside of the academic world. And I was able to get funding from them to set up this website called sensitivityresearch.com, which has really two goals. One is to disseminate reliable, evidence-based knowledge on sensitivity. And the second goal is to create a network of people that do research in the field of sensitivity. So we do, and to disseminate our measures, making the measures available. Our website has answers to frequently asked questions. It sort of explains what sensitivity is, what it isn't. And then it also provides the opportunity for people to measure their own sensitivity with the self-report questionnaires. Online, they can send themselves the response. And we have further information on research, but also the opportunity for people to participate in research on sensitivity.
Yeah, this is a great place to show how possible to understand for regular people way, explain academic research on environmental sensitivity. So that's a great work. And we are going to the end. So the podcast in general is mainly about the concept of context of professional work, like labor market, and, having this advantage of environmental sensitivity, the level of intense, and does it influence in professional life? And what do you think about it? Do you think that sensitivity is a trait that influences the professional people's life?
Yes, it certainly does. So sensitivity is a key aspect of people's temperament and their personality. So it will have an impact on their experiences, and it will have an impact on their performance. It will have an impact on their abilities. So it's a very important human trait that should be considered as well in the work environment. And there are different implications. So we've done some research on burnout, and we found that highly sensitive people are more likely to experience burnout. So it's important to look at that from that perspective. But at the same time, highly sensitive people have specific skills and abilities. So it's important to, when recruiting people into jobs, to make sure that they have the suitable sensitivity level for a particular job. So sensitive people are particularly great when they have to process complex information. They're particularly good when it comes to aesthetic aspects. They're particularly good when it comes to interpersonal aspects. So that's why many highly sensitive people end up in academic roles, for example, where they can engage with something deeply and have quite a bit of independence as well. They often tend to become therapists and coaches because they really are able to put themselves into the situation of someone else, and they have high levels of empathy, and they are good at understanding other people. They're good listeners. Also, many highly sensitive people will end up in more creative work, artists, paintings, music, all of those things are things that sensitive people are probably better at than less sensitive ones. So they bring specific skills to the workplace. They often perceive things earlier than others. They might pick up on details that others miss. They will see opportunities that other people might not be aware of. So these are all fantastic positive aspects of high sensitivity. The negative ones is that they might be more affected by, strict deadlines and workload that might weigh more on them. They might be more affected in negative ways by work stress, but also by, let's say, conflict in the workplace.
Yes, negative climate.
Bullying in the workplace, negative climate, yes, that, and high stress environments are probably being avoided by highly sensitive people because it's not really a good fit for them. But that said, I've mentioned earlier the different sensitivity types. Mm-hmm. I do believe, so this is still work that we have to do, but based on the theory, I do think that there are people that are highly sensitive but have developed the coping strategies that are necessary to deal with high levels of stress. So it is possible to be highly sensitive and to be able to survive and even thrive in a high stress environment, as long as people have developed the coping strategies needed to deal with those experiences.
Yes.
And that suggests that for highly sensitive people, it's particularly important to really know how to deal with stress in order to reduce the stress or the emotional response that they experience with that, and as well as the physiological reactivity that might come with stress.
Yes, not to give up, but work at the competences. Thank you very much. That was a pleasure for me. Thank you for sharing the result of your research and your impact on that. So that's a great thing that we have this possibility. Thank you very much.
Promotion. Sensitive Career Management Project has been funded with the support of the European Commission. This podcast reflects the views only of the author, and the Commission cannot be held responsible for any use which may be made of the information contained therein. Wow! The podcast about the superpowers of highly sensitive people.